and welcome to the Mount Rushmore podcast. My name is Jeff, and I'm joined, as usual, by my good buddies Richard.
Hello.
And Michael.
Howdy.
Richard and Michael, they're constantly at each other's throats, which is
this
foreshadowing
guy.
as they debate and deliberate the most tasty answers to any given delicious topic. And this week's topic is the Mount Rushmore of comedic Draculas.
Gee, whose idea was this, Jeff?
Jeff, before you go on, I got a question for you.
Yes, sir.
Why doesn't Dracula have any friends?
Why?
Because he's a pain in the neck.
Oh, that is hilarious Bazooka Joe quality Laffy Taffy joke there.
Oh, I've got more.
Okay, tell me another one.
What is Dracula's favorite breakfast cereal?
Oh, what?
Ready Neck. I don't get that. Hold on. Let me get rid of that one.
Wow.
Let me start.
Ready, Nick? Okay. Tell me another one.
How does Count Dracula feel after a long night?
How?
Dead on his feet.
Okay. That's another foreshadowing from one of the answers that was very popular. Amongst all these fabulous people that I pulled out on Facebook, and we know how painful that can be.
Ouch.
I don't even know if you said the topic yet.
Yeah. So Michael and Richard ignore the post that I put out on Facebook.
No. Did we even
haven't said the topic yet?
the actual?
sorry.
What's the name?
The
What are we
topic-
talking about today?
Well, I was about to say it. The topic is the Mount Rushmore of comedic Draculas. And Richard asked why I thought of this topic, and the answer was no, I thought of the Mount Rushmore of comedic animated Draculas, but that was a little bit too narrow. And I think the topic, as I posted it on Facebook, was comedic depictions of Dracula. And Dracula has become ubiquitous with vampire.
It's like Xerox, right?
Yeah, yeah. So with so many great answers, so many fun answers, so many people embrace all these wacky, loony depictions of Dracula and other vampires in pop culture. In fact, there's like a prototypical. What does a Dracula type of vampire look like versus like a True Blood vampire?
It's all based on the original image of Bela Lugosi as Dracula, with the same sort of tuxedo, with the cape and the kind of the quasi cross that he's wearing with a little bit of red in there.
The widow's peak.
The widow's peak, kind of Butch Patrick haircut going backwards.
Yeah.
It's that, and then
Pale skin, black hair.
Yeah.
And that's pretty. What I think is hilarious is what isn't already funny about Dracula. Like he's a goofball.
He's a goober.
Yeah.
The what I thought was interesting, this became a really interesting challenge once it became comedic Draculas instead of comedic vampires.
Yeah.
Or when you eliminated that it had to be a Dracula kind of base, because a few years ago you showed me the greatest vampire movie of all time, which was What We Do in the Shadows.
Oh yeah, that was so
it is
amazing.
not even
Incredible.
Like the greatest like vampire movie. It's the greatest. It's like one of my top 3 comedies. Like
that's great. Yeah,
it's right up there with like Spinal Tap. Just in its perfect production. And so it pained me to be like, we can't really choose that.
Them, no.
You can't just use generic vampires.
Yeah,
Even if they look like Dracula.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a tough kind of ask, and I thought that made it a little bit more challenging.
Well, our followers on Facebook did not split hairs so finely when a Dracula vampire versus vampire, but for the most part, they did pick ones that had the cape, that had the widow's peak, that had that thing that might not have been actually Count Dracula. So to thank those listeners, I just want to give some shout outs throughout this episode of the podcast to those people who did do us the big solid and go out there and give some fun answers. So there were 2 people. One is a former guest on this podcast, and those people chose Count Duckula. That's Sam Hopkins and April Calger, who is a very talented comedian.
Wait, Sam Hopkins?
Yeah, sounds very familiar, doesn't it? Yeah. Yeah. And then I'm choosing these because these guys, I don't think that you guys have chosen these in your answers, but there was another couple choices from Cecily Gish, Mary Jo Newton-Tinlin, who had some really great suggestions, and Ro Del Grazie. They all chose Hotel Transylvania. So that's kind of a newer comedic depiction.
Sure.
and that's characterized by Adam Sandler, right?
Yeah, it's a Sandler-free zone around here. They just obviously they don't listen. They don't know the rules. Listen.
Well, I think Sandler's back after his SNL appearance.
You mean the Sandman?
In the Graces.
I was thinking about. I haven't seen Hotel Transylvania, any one of the three, and I was thinking of Adam Sandler today. And for like a moment, I got kind of mad, and I was like, this guy just makes like crappy movies. And I was like, oh, this guy just makes movies that he wants to make.
Yeah.
Okay. And some people want to see him. And I thought, okay. And it's okay if I don't want to see him. And I thought,
yeah,
okay. And I was like, there's nothing wrong with that.
It's not like you're not getting to make a movie because of him.
Yeah. All he does is, he just takes up a little bit of space, but then he makes it. It's the space that people that want to see his movies.
It's a space you would never be in anyway.
Yeah. So
what do you care?
I had such a moment of peace, like thinking about Hotel Transylvania and Adam Sandler today. I was just like, oh yeah, it's
all cool.
It's totally fine. It might not be my taste, but like, and then I started thinking like, oh well, I don't have to be angry about anything anymore. And it was like such a good therapy session.
I think one thing that Sandler did that made him popular, and then maybe made people perceived him differently, was he always was kind of a cartoon character on SNL. Mm-hmm. He had those high-pitched voices and things like that. But speaking of What We Do in the Shadows, there were 3 people who submitted What We Do in the Shadows. Mary Stanford, my former neighbor and Disney coworker, Melissa Arredondo, talented photographer and fan of the podcast, and Sarah Reeve. Her photo was just stunning. Sure. Very attractive woman.
Hey.
Sorry. So
you're right.
These folks.
What do I mean? Yeah,
you're right. And stop it.
And stop it.
This is a former podcast guest, Sarah Reeve, and the better half of Richard Manfredi. So they chose What We Do in the Shadows, which Michael has name-checked as a top 10 comedy and one of the best.
Okay, guys, I'm so excited about this week. I went out and got a cherry Slurpee.
Oh.
That way that my mouth and tongue can look red, as if I've been drinking blood from a nubile handmaiden. Oh. So if you hear this...
That's blood from a nubile hand.
That's actually that actually was.
Richard, I got a question for you. What's Dracula's favorite flavor of ice cream?
I don't know, Michael.
Vanilla. Nailed it. Dracula.
That's pretty great.
You can use that, Adam Sandler, if you're listening.
We are recording this next to a cemetery, which I think maybe was modeled after the one from Plan 9 from Outer Space, or inspired that. So I'm not going to stop name checking the people who responded to the question that I put out on Facebook as to name your favorite comedic depiction of Dracula. I'm going to do it throughout the podcast, but I'm going to let Richard and Michael get right to it.
Wow, the intro to this episode is so long that I feel like I've lived since like 1592.
Yeah.
So let's get going. Richard, you start.
All right. So my first choice is the late 70s movie classic, Love at First Bite.
Also, George Hamilton, also on my list.
Also on your list, and George Hamilton, the Tannis of all Draculas.
You could have just said the Tannist of all.
Well, there's...
He might have that. He might have that, just that trophy.
Yeah.
It's a bronze trophy, of course.
Well, that's the Doonesbury thing, the George Hamilton tanning
classic
or something like that.
Yeah.
And this was a movie I remember watching as a kid a lot. Like, it came on the Independent Channel on the regs.
Yeah.
And I actually watched about half of it today in prep for it.
Yeah.
Maybe it didn't hold up quite as well as I remember.
Let me tell you something about movies from like 1977 to like 1981. Man, outside of Star Wars, they love disco. They had to shoehorn disco. Like the Godfather scene with disco was really weird.
Yeah.
Like I did not understand that. But disco was just so prevalent in every movie. It was just like, I'm trying to think of what the fad would be now that is just in every movie.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Disco must
something about the internet.
Yeah, I don't know. There was something about just, he dances with what's her name, the Cindy, the model.
In that Thatcher biopic, Meryl Streep does parkour for a little bit.
Right, she does.
It felt like pulled me out of the story, but
it's true to life. It's also true to life.
It's also true. She invented
that. This movie has such a special feeling for me in the way that the line delivery of when he's like playing the piano in his castle, and the wolves are howling, and he says, "The children of the night, shut up." Yes. My dad used to say that all the time.
That line specifically was name checked by Brenda Leff.
Oh, was it?
Your
thing.
Yeah, and David Huff, Bruce Green, Brenda Leff, and Linda Bailey Walshall brought it up.
It's like, we'll get to this later, and it captures a lot of Dracula mythos, which is interesting, where Dracula is forced to, or either he's forced or he chooses to leave his home.
In this case, because the Romanian national gymnastics team was going to be taking over his castle.
I didn't know I couldn't remember what the reason was.
That's why.
There's another I can't remember what it was now. Another movie that from the 70s that had a similar thing where he was ousted because of communists had invaded. Oh. But like a big thing about Dracula, or the character of Dracula, is that he's kind of forced, or he moves out of his home country and he's the stranger in a strange land. Yeah. You know, in the classic Dracula, he moves to London. In this, it's obviously in New York.
Like what's in the Eddie Murphy, what was that? What was the Eddie Murphy one where he's a vampire in Brooklyn? That's another one where he has to move.
Yeah. I think that there is a very interesting aspect of Dracula where he represents
the fish out of water. Yeah.
Not only that, but like the other. Mm-hmm. He is a foreigner. Yeah. And a very distinct foreigner coming into a more civilized city. Yeah. And he's also just seen as other.
In the original film, nationalism, national pride, and that's after World War I, isn't it?
Yeah, it's between 1 and 2.
Yeah. So this distrust, as we are noted to have in the U.S., of the foreigner, the other, Dracula perfectly personifies that, and especially in that he is also attractive and he's got wealth, he's got stature, he's got all these things that the kind of American ideal might be kind of afraid of. So that's what I think is interesting, is that Love at First Bite, it's George Hamilton, this very attractive, seductive guy who would by then become a parody of himself after like Zorro the Gay Blade.
Zorro the Gay Blade was after.
Was after this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because he realized, I think he thought, I can just keep remaking a classic.
Yeah. The genre parody.
Maybe you shouldn't.
I remember seeing this at the Seville Square Cinema in Kansas City.
Hell yeah.
$1.50 was too much to pay for this thing. But yes, disco. I love the nightlife.
And also, there's a lot of racism in this movie.
Oh, is there? I forgot about that.
It's bad enough that I was reading some of the reviews from like when it first came out, and when the New York
Times, when racism was okay.
Yeah, in 1979, when they're saying, boy, some of these ethnic stereotypes are pretty heavy-handed.
Oh, wow.
If you were racist in 1979, you don't want to know what it's like 30 years later, how it aged 40 years later.
Yeah. Well, that is a great first choice. Was there anything else you wanted to share, Michael, about your love for this film?
What it taught me, either like a false Dracula stereotype or one that I just don't remember from the actual novel or original movies, was that to turn into a vampire, you need to be bitten 3 times.
Oh.
I remember that as like the main girl in it. Like she was bitten by Dracula and then she was bitten again. It was like going on like 3 dates before she's like, she has to hook up with him, and they fly off and turn into bats and fly to Jamaica or whatever. But like it taught me like this, either something that has stayed with me. Like I've assumed like, oh yeah, well, Dracula doesn't bite you. He's got to bite you 3 times. But I think that might be kind of false.
I do too. I think we should point out the winning supporting role by Artie Johnson as Renfeld.
That guy is
just a comedic genius. Yeah, and also the fact that the bats are the fakest looking bats this side of Ed Wood. Yeah. And it's charming. It's great. It actually kind of adds to the charm of the movie. Yeah. If it would have been like good like special effects, I think it would have been like off a little bit.
Well, what I think is something I wrote in my notes were funny on purpose versus funny bad. And somebody could have interpreted comedic depictions of Dracula as something that wasn't the intention of the filmmaker.
Van Helsing, yes.
Yeah. I love Van Helsing.
Do you?
Yeah, Hugh Jackman, Van Helsing?
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Oh, boy. We've got contrimps here.
We're going to have words.
I like the ride
okay.
at Universal.
Oh, yeah.
That was fun.
That, yeah.
Was that part of like the proto-Dark Universe?
Yeah, I think it was. And their speculation was that they could have relaunched Frankenstein, Wolfman, Mummy?
Well, that's what they were supposed to be doing with that the Tom Cruise Mummy.
Yeah, the Dark Universe. Yeah.
Tom Cruise and what's his name was going to play
Benicio del Toro was a Wolfman, I think.
Let's say it's The Rock.
Okay, The Rock was in there.
Yeah.
Okay. What song does Dracula hate the most?
Something with a steak.
You are my sunshine.
Oh my!
My only sunshine.
Jeff, is this happening the entire podcast?
I guess so.
I got a lot of these guys. How does Dracula keep fit? Oh, I got two now. I just made one up.
Oh my!
I got a special one for Jeff. How does Dracula one?
Scaremaster.
What'd you say?
Scaremaster.
That's really good.
Oh, okay.
That's better than badminton.
Oh, badminton. So that's pretty good.
That's his favorite sport.
What is Dracula's least favorite exercise?
Coffin.
CrossFit.
That's
for you, Jeffrey. I just made that up right now.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Okay.
I'll add that to
Richard chose the first one, which happened to be Michael's one as well. So Michael, choose the next one.
My next one is I guess we got to talk about it. It has to be up here just because everyone assumes it's going to be up here.
Okay.
Dracula Dead and Loving It.
Yeah, also on my list.
Yeah,
okay.
This is like Mel Brooks at the literal nadir of his comedic.
Last thing he's directed.
The last thing he's directed.
Was it really?
Yeah.
It feels like, but this was right before or a few years before he went off and did producers on Broadway.
Yeah.
But this was just like every joke is so tired. Like Leslie Nielsen is, there's like 3 or 4 like national comedic treasures.
Yeah.
It's like Danny Kaye and it's Leslie Nielsen.
Yeah.
The Canadian national treasure.
Oh, is he Canadian?
Yeah.
Oh.
He's American-ish.
Mm-hmm.
All Canada's kind of American-ish. And Dick Van Dyke. Like, just 3 guys that you're just like, they're just naturally, like, there's something in their face and there's something that's just, like, funny.
Yeah.
But Leslie Nielsen was, like, tasked to play Dracula in a very straightforward retelling of the Dracula story.
Yeah.
This movie doesn't diverge that much. It's Renfield goes to Transylvania. They go back and move back to Carfax Abbey. He falls in love with someone who he thinks is Mina Harkness.
Yeah.
And he dances with her. And all of the,
it follows the beats.
It's every beat. It's literally Dracula with, like,
bumbling Leslie Nielsen.
Yeah, and terrible, just like jokes. But you have to talk about it because it's the one that you think of most when you think of like a funny Dracula, and you think of it by like default without actually thinking of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I put down in my notes, I just had, this is an example of how not to do a funny Dracula.
Imagine former podcast guests Anderson Dadu and Jennifer Dudley. Oh, was she on our podcast? She was on a different podcast.
No, she suggested a topic for us one time.
Yeah, okay. They both suggested Dracula Dead and Loving It. And I think the love that we have for Leslie Nielsen is one of the reasons that you probably would go see this film.
Yes.
And I think
for the fact that it's Mel Brooks.
It's Mel Brooks, yeah.
That
seems like a
you
gimme.
Think, how could you go wrong with that? Here's how you can go wrong.
I think that might be what the studios say. Like, here are these 2 people with track records a mile long. This should be a no-brainer. Let's not worry about actual jokes in the script, and let's not worry about the fact that I don't know, that this is such trodden territory.
I think too, there's 2 things that happened. One, this is coming on the heels of a very popular Dracula movie. Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula came out, and that was very popular. It was very different. It was very real in a certain sense. It was very gothic, and they kind of just steal bits and jokes out of it here and there.
You guys both chose it because it wasn't good?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But then
not good enough considering who the provenance of.
It's just not good.
I think I chose it because it's representative of what people think is funny Dracula.
Okay.
I don't know. There's something. So it came out 5 years, not even that long. 3 years after
Bram Stoker's Dracula.
And I've got like a 0.2B to tag onto that. I'll come back to that. But then also, this is the man that did Young Frankenstein. Yeah. This is a man that
did silent movie.
Mel
Brooks
should
have the genre done. Yeah.
That's right. Mel Brooks could have done this movie maybe as a black and white movie too. Maybe he could have pulled stuff in from that and convinced the studio, hey, you remember what I did. This is probably how it convinced me to do it in the first place. I want to go back to that. I want to see if I can do that. But it's goofy and stupid.
It's basically a lot of boob jokes.
Oh, I gotta watch this.
And a lot of like dreary slapstick with Leslie Nielsen, who's kind of a couple of years past his prime to be doing that at that point.
Oh,
the other one I wanted to get back to was this came out in 1995. Coppola's Dracula came out in 92. Mm-hmm. In 1993, The Simpsons did a Treehouse of Horror.
Yeah,
with Mr. Burns as a vampire, and they did all of these jokes that they eventually also kind of did in this movie.
Yeah,
like before, and it being The Simpsons, they did it better. From Richard's coffin.
Yeah,
it's like every fourth joke on my list of like Dracula
coffin.
jokes. Yeah. It's all coffin jokes. Mm-hmm. It sounds like we might get to this at the other end of the break. But the point is that somebody did it better, and they just kind of still went along doing the same jokes, and that is really weird and really just unfortunate.
Yeah. Well, let's take a break between our choices. I think we know what's coming up. And when you say Leslie Nielsen and you say esteemed Canadian, I also want to there's an esteemed Canadian friend of mine named Paul P.K. Kingston, who is a listener to the podcast, or at least a commenter on the Facebook site, and he let us know that growing up in Canada, there was a beautiful example of what happens when you give a narcissist a budget and minimal supervision. And Vincent Price was also in it, and that is the show The Hilarious House of Frightenstein. And I clicked on the show, and it looked like it had fairly high production values, only to like read that they did 130 episodes in 9 months. So they just
what is going
on? They
on?
just cranked these things out. But as the internet covers all the territory that there is out there, it starts to reveal some of these things that I had no idea that there was this cool show. So I can't wait to go, and maybe you listeners should go dig into this. I'm going to play a sound clip right now from The Hilarious House of Frightenstein. Wasn't that hilarious? Yes. Yes. But the opening feels like it's almost something right out of Thriller, because it's Vincent Price and some kind of sound effects and things like that. So maybe Michael Jackson used to watch that on tour in Toronto or something.
Hey, Jeff, I know we're in halftime, but what is Transylvania?
What is Transylvania?
It's Dracula's territory.
Oh, wow.
You're encouraging him, Jeff. When you react to it, you're encouraging.
That is pretty amazing.
We have this guy that dresses up as a certain man bat. Did I get that right? And you can use any of these.
This is good stuff. He has a cape. What I think is hilarious about Batman 2.
We're in halftime, by the way, everybody. In case you're listening.
So we are at our halftime.
Take a break for a couple minutes.
If you do your customary skip through 60 to 120 seconds,
totally skip
hit it 4 times, and you still won't be close to where we are.
Well, I'm going to ask you guys to, if you are a new listener, if you are a listener if somebody's listened to a few of these podcasts, go back and listen to the rest, or at least download them. And while you're at the place where you download it, you might as well give a review or a rating. Actually, we would legit love to hear what you say, whether it's 1 star or 5 stars. We just love to hear some feedback. And to those who have gone into the Facebook page and responded to some of our questions, or even as individuals responded to like my page when I ask people about topics, thank you so much. And we would love to hear your suggestions for episodes. You could go on and leave a suggestion for a topic you'd love to hear Michael and Richard go at each other on. Previous question suggesters have ended up on this show, so that was kind of cool. And we do like to support podcasts, whether they tackle the hard-hitting topics like we do or not. And here's one of them.
I'm Megan.
I'm RJ.
And we host Oh No Lit Class, a comedy literature podcast that tells you all the strange and sexy facts you never knew about the books you had to read in school.
Every episode is a fun, foul-mouthed spark notes for your ears, filled with author bios, plot summaries, bad impressions, and Megan singing.
It's mostly you that sings.
No, I sing well, she sings poorly.
That's not true. So come listen to us ruin classic literature one book at a time at ohnolitclass.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
Oh No Lit Class. We're for kids.
No, we're not.
Okay. We are back. And this has been a groovy topic and a ghoulish way to discuss. That's a foreshadowing of something I might talk about. Richard, please tell us your third choice.
Well, not since Michael stomped all over it.
Yeah.
I might as well go out and say it's the Treehouse of Horrors episode number 4.
I would say I teed you up to it without actually knowing.
Yeah.
That's like your opinion, man.
Those are some of my best favorite episodes. There's been whole seasons that I've skipped, but then I've seen this Treehouse of Horror.
It's like you can tell they put extra effort into those episodes. Yeah. And this one, number 4, 4th season, had it wasn't the 4th season, but the 4th episode of it, had 3 different plot points, or mini stories, I guess. Yeah. And the third one was Bart Simpson's Dracula. And this was the basically Bram Stoker's Dracula story as played out with Lisa being the only person in the family when they go to visit Mr. Burns in his castle in Pennsylvania, who suspects that Mr. Burns may be, in fact, a vampire.
Yeah.
I love her delivery of vampire,
which they later find out to be true, and maybe they should have found out with some clues, like his autobiography being called "Yes, I Am a Vampire," with the foreword by Steve Allen. And they just and Michael mentioned it when he was talking about it. They really hit the jokes in a smart way.
Yeah.
Versus something like Dead and Loving It, when it's just like whatever the most obvious Dracula joke is they could possibly make.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and make it. With The Simpsons, and especially being early Simpsons when it was really kind of fiery at its peak, they went for like
the jugular.
Oh my god.
Oh my god.
Yeah, they went for the jugular with those jokes. And I think that you can tell that, and I was reading a little bit about this episode, that there were several people on the cast who were big kind of Universal horror fans, so you can tell that they really knew the source material.
They also, unfortunately, like I said, they also were able to capture the Bram Stoker or the Francis Ford Coppola version of that,
right,
to transport that onto Mr. Burns in a perfect way, where he's already like this decrepit. The Gary Oldman, when he's in like the old version of Dracula in Bram Stoker's Dracula, is so cake white, and he looks like he's 300 years old.
Right.
And Mr. Burns, of course,
is 300 years old.
Maybe 300 years old himself. And I think that was such a perfect, kind
of merging and melding.
Yes. Yeah. That they could just put that on him, and it fit so perfectly. And, right up until Bart goes down the super fun, happy slide.
Well, it's, he really shouldn't do it, but when's he going to be back there?
I was just sometimes with the topics, we choose topics that are fun to us because I think it's a lot of territory to roam around in, or that raise interesting questions. For me, the question is why? Why this mythology?
Why Dracula?
Why Dracula? Like, why is it so funny? Why would on a special episode of The Jeffersons, the Halloween episode, does George Jetson come out and dance around in the Dracula costume? We all laugh and love it. And we're talking about the A-list stuff, but every damn episode of every sitcom has a Halloween episode where somebody's dressed like Dracula for that party.
I think it is such a testament to those early 1930s, Universal
horror films.
Like, they just cracked this image, and they, whether it's Dracula or The Mummy or Frankenstein's monster or what have you, all of them, they have just cemented this image of what Dracula should be, and it is the same way as Mickey Mouse.
It's just accepted as this is how it is.
When you go to buy a vampire costume at a kid's costume store or whatever, it's going to be that Bela Lugosi one.
Yeah, nobody shows up to Party City and says, "No, I don't want that one. I want the Max Schreck one."
Oh yeah,
from Nosferatu. I want that one.
Nobody wants the butt-haired, butt-faced, or the butt-headed Dracula.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. I just find it very interesting, and sometimes I wonder, is it because he did legitimately scare us as young people, or in some films, that it's kind of a revenge? Like, oh, let's disarm this. Let's defang this character. Yeah.
Literally defang him, yeah.
I think that's pretty interesting, too. I think that once you kind of adopt it into an accepted, he's dressed up like a dandy. He's dressed up as this foreign dandy in a tuxedo, and it's just like, all right. He's just another guy you can throw a pie in his face and then laugh at him like a wealthy dowager.
I always think it's funny that Dracula is pretty much an Avenger. He just happens to drink the blood of the living. Like if he flies.
Right.
He's got superhuman strength.
He's got some sort of mental telepathy powers.
Yeah.
Or he'll be able to control people with his mind.
Yeah, he can change form. He can, but he works nights. Those guys would be happy that this guy's going to work nights. Okay. So did you espouse the episode in the way that you wanted to?
Yeah, I feel good about it.
Okay, Michael. Now you crap on some other choices people.
Yeah, whatever. I'll let you know what my last choice is now, and then you can ruin it for everybody.
I feel like I did not do that. I feel like
I feel attacked a little bit.
Okay, I have to say before we move on, because I don't want to miss the end of this episode without saying the overwhelming choice among the submitters on Facebook was
the Count.
Six wonderful people chose the Count Von Count from Sesame Street, and I didn't realize his last name was Von Count.
Yeah.
And then looking up the names of the Count Von Count is in all these different languages. The Count of Count, or in all the different places where Sesame Street is aired, he has different names, but it's usually the Count of Counting or County Count or the Count that likes to count or something like that.
Interesting.
But Beckett Graham, Mary Jo Newton-Tinlin, Jeanette Bonjour, Christy Patterson-Veitch, Chris Hutchings, and our friend Patty. I owe him $10 because we had a bet.
That's blood money.
And my bet was that the new parents, the parents of young children, one of you at least would pick the Count Von Count. So
it's not Dracula though.
He's not Dracula.
See, thank you, Richard.
Okay.
Richard and I are going to shake hands.
But Patty did want, and we can put a link to this in the show notes or something like that. Wanted to illustrate the time when Count Von Count had to deal with the fact that his bats wanted to unionize against him because they never got to count. So they never had all the fun. So I'm going to link here. Here's a clip from that.
Oh, but what is wrong?
Just, we never have any fun. We never get to count. It's our turn 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 to count.
I have an idea.
It's our turn to count.
Okay, my darlings.
It's our turn to count.
You will get to count.
Yay!
You will get to count all the counts in the room. And then I, the Count, will count all the bats. You first, my
All right, we're back. Michael, what do you got?
I have Vladimir Dracula, a.k.a. Sam Dracula, a.k.a. Grandpa from the Munsters.
Oh, my God.
He is a Dracula?
He's officially a Dracula.
And there were three of our folks chose that. Jim Coughlin, Jessica Brainerd, Ricky Rosales.
He and Lily, his daughter,
Yeah.
moved out of Transylvania to the United States sometime a long time ago. And, of course, she met up with, Herman Munster. It's funny. People call him Grandpa Munster, but he's not Grandpa Munster.
He's Grandpa Dracula.
Grandpa Dracula. He is a Dracula. He's a vampire. He's a scientist. He's a magician. And also, I think his best quality, he's like a shyster and a schemer.
Yeah.
I love that he and Herman just try to get into like crazy money making.
Yeah.
Like as if you're not playing the long game. You're like 400 years old.
Yeah.
Like what is like they just always got to get rich quick.
Uh-huh.
But he plays just a very in the same sort of traditional Dracula garb, but they're just in the United States and they don't see themselves as weirdos.
Yeah.
Which I think is always just such a fun twist on a character, is they're these obvious weirdos who don't see themselves as weirdos.
Yeah.
They brought in Marilyn, I guess their cousin, their nephew, their niece,
Niece or something. Yeah.
their niece to live with him, and they're always referring to her as, oh my God, she's never going to find love because of look at how she looks. But he is just Al Lewis, who plays the character, is just this over the top, really just silly version of Dracula.
Yeah.
And I think it's unexpected. I think it's the kind of Dracula vampire pastiche put on him without ever falling into like, he's never a bloodsucker. He's never, other than like trying to take people for their money, he's never trying to like kill people.
Yeah.
Did they ever reference how he survives?
I don't know.
It's funny that the in the Wikipedia comments that he can walk in sunlight and he does not drink blood. So he's
not really a vampire.
He's adapted.
He's Dracula.
Just a dandy.
He's Dracula-ish.
Yeah, he's Dracula adjacent. Yeah.
But I think the show in general just fills me with a whole lot of just wonderful, good feelings in the same way that Gilligan's Island did. It's that, we talked about it quite a bit, that fantasy 1967 sci-fi weird thing that was going on in America where
there are all these magical shows.
Weird shows. And
Addams Family, Bewitched, I Dream of Jeannie, My Mother the Car, all these fantastical, goofy things.
What I didn't know is I went and looked and watched the original. What's it called? The first episode is the
pilot.
The first pilot.
Monsters
for it.
Go Home. Was it?
No, it was like the pilot for it, and half the cast was recast.
Yeah.
Butch Patrick was originally a kid by the name of Happy Durman.
Oh God.
Playing whatever it was that was Eddie.
Yeah.
Lily wasn't played by Yvonne DiCarlo.
Oh.
It's played by another actress, and her name, where do I have it? I have it written down. Her name was Phoebe, and there's elements of the show that what it would become, but it's just totally off.
Wow, that's really interesting.
It makes me really wish, and I've heard this talked about before, that there was a pilots TV channel.
Yeah.
There was just all pilots of shows that were never picked up.
Yeah.
All the weird stuff that all famous people are in that just go nowhere. That regime change happens at CBS and something is filmed and shelved.
Oh yeah.
But that would have been I would love just to watch pilots, the original version of whatever we see. And the Munsters one that's available on YouTube. YouTube in 2 parts is just.
I gotta watch that.
Yeah.
I did learn that there was a show on when I was much younger called Love American Style, and
so I've heard this this name, but I have no idea what this is.
You're not missing nothing.
It was like an anthology series about
if Love
people
Boat
in
was,
love.
Yeah, but yes, exactly. And there was unlike something like Love Boat or Fantasy Island, it didn't occur in the same location. But from what I'm to understand, those were failed pilots recut into a show. So Love and the Happy Days was a full Gary Marshall sitcom pilot, and it didn't pass. So they excerpted it into Love American Style, and then when American Graffiti became very popular, they dug that sucker out and then made it into a show.
Right.
I would like to make one final Grandpa.
Yes. Al Lewis.
Yes. Vampire reference. In that, at some point, I guess it must have been the mid '80s, maybe even early '90s, he had a 1-900 number to call the junior vampires, and it was, "Hey kids, you can call and hear all this fun vampire-related jokes.
Wow!
Just ask your parents' permission. You can find the YouTube of it,
or don't ask their permission,
or don't. It's like $2.95 for the first minute, 95 cents each edition. It's just like." Who are these kids that are jonesing to go to hear hear vampire jokes from old ass Grandpa Munster? I don't know.
He is a sketchy dude from the stories I've heard about him. He had a whole political career, and I think he was a crooked judge and all this crazy stuff. Richard, what do you got?
All right, so my last one is the Judd Hirsch starring TV movie, The Halloween That Almost Wasn't. Mm-hmm. Or if you pick this up on VHS, you might see this as The Night Dracula Saved the World.
Yeah.
Which is a little bit of an overreach if you see the plot.
Okay. Yeah, that one was on the list.
Oh, was it?
Yeah. The folks who chose that one were, and guys, I'm sorry, this list has eaten the podcast. I'm not trying to discount your answers. I just want to acknowledge the people who were kind enough to kind of join us in the topic. EJ Subkoviak and Patty Cullum, friend of the podcast, had chose that one.
This is,
you know what?
What?
What does Dracula like to have his food served?
What?
Bite-sized pieces.
Mm-hmm. So this was, I remember this from being on the Disney Channel back in the early to mid 80s, probably.
Yeah.
They'd roll this out around Halloween time.
Yeah.
And it looks like it was shot on a VHS camera.
Does it really?
Or it really looks like cheap. And the basic plot is that there is a rumor going around that Halloween is going to be canceled.
Oh.
And so Dracula decides to hold a summit with all the most famous monsters in the world, including the werewolf.
We know all those
Frankenstein's
monsters.
monster, Zabar the zombie of Haiti.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
The Mummy of Egypt. Not to be confused with the Mummy of Belgium.
Toledo.
Yeah. And also the Witch, played by the lovely Mariette Hartley.
Oh, wow.
And basically what comes down...
I love that these are the only monsters that exist, that no one has like really made a major effort
to invent new
monsters. They're all like, just get a mummy and a werewolf.
Yeah.
And if you get a blob creature in there, that's fine.
Who are the characters from Monster Mash?
That's just
fine. That's fine.
Oh, alopecia, man. Yeah, we'll just do mummy.
And so basically it comes out that the witch was actually the one who is spreading these rumors because she is upset with people making fun of her for how ugly she is.
Oh.
So and apparently Halloween can't happen if she doesn't fly over the moon. Which I wasn't aware of.
That is so everybody knows that.
Oh,
yeah, come on.
Is that like getting bitten 3 times in that realm?
Fly over the moon.
That's science. That's the moon. That's the
true.
science.
I believe it's the cow jumps over the moon, and the dish and the
runs away with the spoon. Something like that.
It's all connected.
What about Judd Hirsch's performance? Is there something compelling there?
Not particularly. No.
He's a good Rieger from Taxi, but I don't know.
He's definitely the most Jewish.
I wasn't going to use
Dracula.
that word.
I'll say it. He's the most Jewish Dracula I think that we've got in cinema today. And it kind of ends, by the way, with one of the witch's demands, because she makes this list of demands to be able to continue with it, is that she wants to go out disco dancing.
Okay.
So
disco comes full circle.
So it ends with Mariette Hartley doing a Wonder Woman spin, and she transforms from this, the stereotypical witch with a big nose and the wart on it and all that, to, Mariette Hartley, beautiful 70s actress.
Yeah.
At which time Judd Hirsch says, "Well, I can do that," and rips off his cape, and he's got like the John Travolta white disco suit, and he starts disco dancing.
Wow.
Woof.
This is great.
That's another, is our common image of the witch based entirely on the Wizard of Oz from the 30s too?
Yes.
See that? I mean, that is. I like.
I'm sure that actually. I take that back. It's probably they probably got that from like a grim fairy tale version of the witch.
I do like that Hollywood just stopped trying.
Yeah.
They figured it out 60 years ago. Just go with that, and
It fell into an archetype.
Yeah.
I would say if you had to draw a pirate now, you might draw this Johnny Deppish kind of pirate. Whether as if it were asked somebody in the year 2000, they might have done a different one.
I've been the Dread Pirate Robert. So I remember this as a kid, and it's just goofy. And it's, Dracula, I think this is kind of one of the overriding things that we're getting at, has become like this kid's character now.
Oh, for sure.
Which is weird when you think about the concept of Dracula being someone who will murder you, suck your blood, turn you into this horrible, undead creature. Mm-hmm. A perfect, kid's role.
Yeah.
Or kid's role model, yeah.
That is a great lead into my final one, though.
Okay.
Okay, go for it.
Right.
Okay, so I was looking for some, some choices, and I looked up animated Draculas to kind of...
Oh, okay.
Or cartoon Draculas, and I stumbled across the worst image I've ever seen, which I'll show to you guys.
Can you explain what that is?
It says Count Dabula, but this isn't my image because this helped me get to something I found even more interesting and more intriguing.
It was a gateway drug, like
it
marijuana.
Was.
Okay.
Can I guess what it is?
Sure.
Is it Banicula?
It isn't.
Okay.
Oh.
It is the Garbage Pail Kids.
Nice.
Nasty Nick.
Image of Dracula. There's a couple different versions of him. There was Nasty Nick and Evil Eddie from the original Garbage Pail Kids. And then there was a later version called Bloody Bram or Reflectionless.
Ooh.
Where
that's clever.
A Dracula is trying to shave and then can't and is cutting himself up because he can't see his reflection.
Wow.
On the first one, he is trying to bite what is effectively a Barbie doll. Mm-hmm. But it made me think of exactly what you're getting at, which is that this reduction of Dracula into this cartoon form. Like, he is no longer scary. He is a cartoon character that my kid wants to see. We have this catalog, this Target catalog, and in it my kid Felix, who's almost 2, flips through it when he's having like his dinner sometimes, and he wants to see just different images. And one of the images he wants to see is like these new kid toys of Dracula and Frankenstein and the whole list that we just talked about with Richard's last pick. The same sort of cast of characters, the same as in Hotel Transylvania. Yeah. But these horrible monsters, this original image of Dracula, this Bela Lugosi that was this fright thing, this was the scariest thing that people ever seen, is now this reduced down to a goofy garbage pail kid's image that all you can do is laugh at. All of these terrible jokes that I've been saying can be reduced down to a garbage pail kid pun of a name. Yeah. And that's all he is now. He's not scary. Yeah. If you want to do scary, you're not going to do Dracula. You're going to do another vampire. Dracula isn't scary anymore. Dracula is comedic. He's funny. Yeah. And he's best as a bubblegum card or best as whatever he is now. I don't know. I found that very interesting. Yeah. You know, we didn't really talk about like Count Duckula, but like I'm sure every joke that I've said
was in the Count Duckula
was in like Count Duckula.
So those are some great choices. I do find it fascinating why Dracula, the Count Dracula character, was once frightening and is now somebody we actually kind of feel kind of warmth for. He's almost become like an emoji, kind of disarmed of some of its fear-inducing impact, even though it's this thing that wants to kill us, at least as we are, and turn us into his servants forever and drink all our blood.
I think, too, the voice. Like, everybody knows what the Dracula voice is. Yeah. I use the Dracula voice in, like, a book I read to Felix for, like, a bat. It's like, blood is a bat. And, like, it's so goofy.
Yeah. So I want to thank our competitors here today, but, of course, our followers on Facebook and folks who listen to the podcast. I want to name drop a few more suggestions that people put in there and some things I hadn't heard before. Tatiana Farrow submitted The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy.
Don't know what that is.
I don't know, but take a listen.
Ain't nobody tell Dracula what to do. Laughing is for sissies. Dracula like to hear clowns screaming. Dracula like his chicken tenderized. Vampires hate Vikings. That's a fact. Dracula ain't too old to kick your butt. Dracula want to bite your nose. Dracula needs your glasses. Dracula not seeing so good no more.
Dracula is kind of a streetwise hustler kind of in this one.
This is Blackula. That's what you're thinking of.
He does kind of seem like that, but he's definitely dealing out punishment on the streets. And Emily Jabas, speaking of Blah, Count Blah from Greg the Bunny is a character.
Okay.
Yeah. And here's a little bit of Greg the Bunny.
Yes. That's it, Blah. Let it out. Get rid of all those violent thoughts.
Oh, you know, Blah, I'm only telling you this because you know what it's like to love someone so much. You know, pining as you have all these years for your dead wife. Yes. But at least you know where she is every night.
And, yeah, so those were some really fun things that I was not hip to when I started researching or even until after these were suggested by listeners. So, dudes, you guys are awesome. There were two of the same, right?
Right.
So 2 of the same. That would be George Hamilton, Love at First Bite, Leslie Nielsen, and Dracula Dead and Loving It. Those 2, ping, up on the Mount Rushmore. And then, you know what? I kind of liked the Bart Simpson's Dracula from Treehouse of Horrors. And, gosh darn it, since I loved him as a kid, Sam Dracula, a.k.a. Grandpa from the Munsters. So this has been the Mount Rushmore of Comedic Draculas. I'm going to stop doing that. I, as always, am Jeff.
Oh, sorry, guys. I'm Richard.
I'm Michael.